you know, here was this king and look how closely we are related to him in terms of our policies and what we're doing. Of course, neither are entirely correct. They're not entirely wrong, but they're not entirely correct. Akbar was his own man who had very clear definitions and very clear vision about what he wanted to do in India and what he wanted to create. And that is what he got on with all these methods and tools that I've mentioned.
So what drew you personally to Akbar? Why Akbar?
Akbar, because well, first of all, I mean, it's the period of history that I've always been interested in. 16th century history has always appealed to me, 16th, 17th century. Akbar because given his stature within Mughal history, given his place within Indian history, I don't think there has been a definitive work about Akbar that is not slanted or biased in some way or another. What I wish to portray is an emperor who is a sort of a definition of an Indian king who, although living in a environment where religion is dominant and, you know, dogma rules everything, tries to stamp, this is what makes him interesting, is that in this environment he creates an individual vision which is then incorporated into state policy and is almost going against the tide. And, you know, and had he lived longer, it might have gone further, obviously would have gone further, but it might have had more longer lasting effects. So Akbar, for that reason, he is a creator. You know, he is somebody who lays the foundations of something that I think which deserve greater study and a more, perhaps a more detached study in terms of any kind of ideology dictating to it.
And certainly a definer of modern India.
Oh yes, absolutely. Without a doubt, Akbar was definitely, he defined the creation of what we know as modern India.
A controversial point of view?
I think there is agreement on that, a sort of consensus, but it isn't defined as to how he defined India, if you know, I can put it like that. I think that is what we really need to get. There's a lot of, I mean, there's a huge body of work, of course, academic work on Akbar and the Mughals in general, but it is not something that you know, the layman or somebody just interested in narrative history would have access to just because of the turgidity or the nature of the volumes that are there. So what I've tried to create is something that is that can be easily understood without getting lost in that body of paperwork and the references and that entire academic perspective. It is a narrative of a man who was one of the singular most influential strain in the creation of modern India.
Which brings us to your sources. Just a little bit about your sources.
Well, there are, of course, the primary sources are the chronicles and the court chronicles of Akbar's time himself. The most sort of frequently visited one is, of course, the Akbarnama and the Ain-e-Akbari, which are the two seminal works of Akbar's reign and rule. Out of the other primary sources, there are various histories which actually do take critical views of him, like
contemporary histories.
Contemporary histories of Akbar's time. Badayuni, the Maulana Badayuni's work, which is a critique of Akbar's rule. We have the records of Humayun's valet, who, you know, wrote his own memoirs, and which we find a lot of reference to Akbar's time. So those are the primary sources, you know, and there are some very good translations, and that is something which I think we have to be thankful to Victorian historians for as well, is the huge sort of undertaking of translating these enormous volumes, which have now, you know, which anyone can access. So that is the primary work. Of course, there are the commentaries, the letters, the various positions taken by scholars in the last century, and, you know, which I have heavily relied on at the Aligarh Muslim University, which has a great fund well, knowledge and access to Akbar's time. There are research papers, there are essays, there are the works of other writers, there are the works, again, we go back to Akbar's time, the work of travellers who travelled to India at the time and visited his court. So, I mean, taken together, it is a huge research base, and, you know, almost intimidating in the sense that what do you want to prioritize and what do you want to use for the book. So it's a lot of, you know, cut and paste, if you can call it. But you cannot take anything for face value, because, as I said, everything was dictated by the ideologies of the time, and therefore that is where one's own sense of history has to come in, and you know, and you make sort of judgments as to who said why and what and who did that benefit, you know. So that is critical in researching Akbar, is being able to decipher and decide what is opinion and what is fact.
And you also read Persian and Arabic.
I can read Persian and Arabic, and that helps to a point. But in terms of translations, of course, I have relied on others and very established works. So, you know, yes, it does help the fact that I can read Persian and Arabic, because I can go through manuscripts and pick up something that makes sense and then refer to a translation. So that method is assisted by that.